Sails a while back and just really excited about it and looking forward to giving you an introduction today. So a little bit more about me. My background, I'm a programmer by trade and have been working in Append2 as the CEO, but recently switched out from that role about a month ago and I'm now acting as managing director of Append2's parent corporation called Epic Creative, where we support Append2's operations and have a couple of the projects that we are working on. So my experience with Node, been working with Node for quite a while, back from the 0.4 days, if you remember that. And I got into Sails last year when I was looking around for a server-side Node.js framework for a project that I was getting into. That project is not released yet. It's a continuous integration system that we've built with Node.js and Docker, if you've worked with Docker at all. And during the course of working on that project, I've gotten really involved in the Sails community. I had the chance to get together with Mike McNeil at a Node.js conference last fall and get to know him a little bit, sit through a meetup presentation that he did, contributed code back to Sails, participated in the community quite a bit, and I'm starting to release some of the code that I've written for Sails. One is a custom adapter, other is a couple of changes to core. So really excited about it and looking forward to kind of giving you the intro and sharing why I really like it today. So first thing I want to do is actually talk a little bit about Node and where Node comes from, where Node is right now, and where Sails fits within the Node.js ecosystem. So there's some great things about Node. If you have used Node.js at all, or you've worked with Node.js at all, you know that it is awesome to be able to write JavaScript on the front end and JavaScript on the back end. The asynchronous programming style that JavaScript brings just lends a lot of performance power because of the event loop that is used in JavaScript, so you can do I/O operations very, very quickly, and there's a lot of great applications that it's well suited for. PayPal just implemented Node, and they not only saw performance gains from switching from Java to Node on their backend code, but they saw huge gains in how quick it was to pull together a team and write Node applications and deliver those out and get them into production. NPM, the Node Package Manager, is another great benefit to Node. It's a sort of a shared library where it's very easy for everybody in the community to publish code they've written and to share that with others, update it, maintain it, and pull it back into projects so everything kind of builds on each other. There's a lot of native bindings, and a native binding is where you can write code in JavaScript that accesses C libraries on the back end, so you can get access to all sorts of stuff within the Unix ecosystem if you write the bindings from JavaScript back to C. The community is thriving. Really, in the last 18 months or so, Node has taken off, and the community is very much supportive of one another. There's a growing number of people working and getting to be better experts with Node. There's a growing number of resources out there. And the last thing is being able to share code between the client and server side. Now, this is more of an advanced benefit, but it is possible depending on how you set up your application, and is really efficient if you can, really kind of see the gains that come from it. Oops. Couple of bad things, though. JavaScript as a language, what makes up JavaScript is, there's some drawbacks to JavaScript. Nothing that you can't live without, but when it comes to people adopting Java, let's say, in its strict typing versus JavaScript's dynamic typing, you're seeing, there's people that out there, even though us in the modern web really like JavaScript, that don't really like JavaScript too much. Things like TypeScript and Dart are attempts to fix this sort of thing. Asynchronous programming is tough. It's really tough. If you're coming from a different programming environment, let's say PHP or Ruby, getting your head around asynchronous programming is what I've seen is one of the biggest learning curves for new developers getting up to speed with Node.js. As any technology, Node is still maturing. We're, again, about 4.5 years into Node.js, and it's competing against other technology stacks that have many, many more years of history and just maturing that have gone on. So there's some rough edges to it. That's smoothed out significantly in the last, again, 18 months or so. But it's maturing. It's a maturing technology. There's no singular approach or standard library for building Node applications, and we're going to be hitting on that quite a bit today. So that results in a lot of different approaches. And you see, if you've heard of Meteor.js, that's one approach versus Express.js and sort of a do-it-yourself approach. That there's not a lot of direction on what's best. Documentation, Node core is well documented, but documentation for the rest of the ecosystem is a little bit tough. Sharing code between the client and server side is not always great either. So I put this on both to just emphasize the fact that this is a hard thing to do. It's not easy to do. You can run into a couple problems. For instance, the DOM is available on the front end, and if you try to use the same business logic on the back end, the DOM isn't available, or the window object or the document object in JavaScript. And so you can run into a couple of pitfalls doing that. There's a lot of shims. Again, there's jQuery for Node that sort of fakes some of these objects that we've come to be used to in the browser environment. Keep hitting my left key or right keyboard key and nothing happens. So last thing, I mean, just what's ugly about Node? It's JavaScript, right? JavaScript, love it or hate it. A lot of developers, if you've read JavaScript, The Good Parts, the joke is that it's a really small book. I have a love-hate relationship with JavaScript. I've poured a lot into it. I love JavaScript at times. I hate JavaScript at times with what it can do and what it can't. And some people find this a real drawback. Callbacks, 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 callbacks. This is the even uglier side of asynchronous programming. There are many ways to structure a Node.js application and deal with the control flow. Callbacks end up being the first thing that people often do and the go-to, but they're also one of the worst. They make following code written in Node and JavaScript incredibly tough. And this is a client-side and a server-side thing. The inconsistent approach has fragmented the Node community. And so there's a lot of people that just they do things. They're all working in different areas. And one of the interesting things that is slowly evolving is Node is actually single-threaded. So in the machine underneath, Node.js uses the V8 JavaScript engine, and the event loop, if you've heard that term with Node, all runs in a single thread, and it makes it's a ceiling you can hit very easily with Node. For instance, if you have a long-running computational task and you do that in Node, everything will get blocked until that gets done. There's new things coming out. There's a multi-core fork of Node. Never used it. Haven't seen that it's gotten too popular. You can now use worker threads in Node, where you can shift that computational time off to different workers. But again, it takes additional logic to do that rather than being in the operating system layer where multi-threaded support has been for a while. And CPUs and servers, really robust servers that have multiple cores, Node can only run on one core. So they're fixing these problems, but this is part of the maturing process with something like Node. So building applications with Node is all about managing consistency. And as a developer, when you set out on this journey, you have to bring a lot of that consistency and that structure to both your project and your team. Again, in my experience, in my project, every Node application that I've seen is built slightly differently. It takes that ramp up time to get familiar, even if some of the same building blocks are used, just how the developer, the architect building the application manage that consistency and what approach they used to try to build in long-term maintenance. So there's a lot of do-it-yourself work that comes from this. So this is where Sails enters. And again, it's my journey in figuring all this out about Node and yet falling in love with the project that led me to Sails.js. And once I found it and the problems that it solved, was very excited and dove in with both feet. So a little background, the guy behind Sails is a guy by the name of Mike McNeil. Again, we kind of hung out a little bit in San Francisco last year. Mike is the founder of a small boutique mobile design consultancy called Balderdash, based out of Austin, Texas. They've got a really cool team, and Sails is a labor of love by everybody at Balderdash. They put in a lot of extra time, and definitely want to give them props for that. Right now, it's got over 7,000 stars and just past 800 forks on GitHub. So we're really starting to see some traction with this framework. It consistently is listed in the top 10 frameworks available across Node, and the community really in the last 6 months has exploded, and it's been pretty cool to watch. What is it? So at its core, Sails is a convention over configuration focused framework. Now, there's a lot of different approaches to building frameworks, but if you've ever used something like Ruby on Rails or Grails in Java, Zen in the Zen framework in PHP land, you're familiar with what a convention over configuration framework is, where there's some magic and then some automatic loading that goes on based off of where you put files and that sort of thing. It does follow a model view controller structure, so it keeps it very, very simple there. One key difference compared to something like Rails is that Sails intentionally is front-end agnostic. So it stops when in delivering your API. It doesn't scaffold out a lot of HTML for you. The opinion of Sails is that it wants to, you got to bring that with you. There's so many different front-end approaches. It focuses on the backend only, with one exception, and that's sockets, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But you can use Backbone with Sails. There's a lot of examples for that. You can use Angular with Sails. You can use Knockout with Sails. It's very easy to bring your own front-end structure. And then this one was really key for me in that it's focused on supporting the enterprise, giant air quotes for the enterprise. Enterprise for me is about stability and reliability. So you take the bleeding edge stuff where you can get cut and burned, and you bring that back a couple notches to the cutting edge, where you're using some really cool advanced techniques in what you build, but stability and reliability are number one. A good release process, documentation, all of these things really mattered to me as I was coming to Sails, and they delivered. I mean, again and again and again. There's some really cool things that Sails does to deliver on this promise of stability and reliability. So let's take a look at some of the features, core features of Sails, and what you can do with it. So the first off is this MVC structure. And there's a really important fact about this MVC structure. First off, you got your basic models, which can be generated from the command line. We'll be taking a look at that. But then the controllers, there's this big assumption that Sails is based off of Express. Express is a Node.js library to handle and talk HTTP. Now, if you come from PHP or you come from Ruby, a lot of this is done for you, where the web server, Apache, Nginx, whatever, takes care of, and PHP takes care of making the HTTP connection and sort of drops you into an environment where you can then work with the requests that come in. Ruby goes a little bit the other direction and has this concept of middleware where you can drop in pieces of code that get inserted and run at different places in the process. Express takes a similar approach where a HTTP request comes into the web server and Express provides all of the functionality to respond with the correct HTTP body type and add HTTP headers, that sort of thing. So Sails lives on top of that, and a lot of apps these days are built with what are called Express controllers. And if you're familiar with Express controllers, you're going to be really comfortable with Sails, because Express or controllers in Sails are just Express middleware. And you'll see that when we get to some code examples. But this is really, really key in that understanding that Sails stands on the shoulders of Express. Express is very well tested. It's one of the most robust Node libraries out there, and is used very, very widely. So it's been very battle tested. And then server-side views Sails does support server-side views. It emphasizes delivering an API. So typically that's JSON. That's just delivered against a URL. But we do have support for server-side views that are rendered based off of controllers. And again, we'll get to that a little bit later. A quick note on the server-side templating. It defaults to EJS templates, if you're familiar with those. EJS is very similar to a PHP, where you have an opening tag, less than %, and then you can enter JavaScript right into that tag, and then it renders it within your HTML. This can be easily extended to handlebars, Jade, anything else that you're familiar with for server-side templating. Not client-side templating. That's something different, and that's, again, front-end agnostic. Sails does not specify what client-side templating to use. But server-side templating, if you want to take advantage of that, it's available, because then again, that's kind of a base feature. The next big thing that Sails plugs into and provides is a object relational mapping layer, or ORM layer. Sails includes this via another project called Waterline. Waterline is also supported by Balderdash, same company, and kind of follows the naval theme and naming theme, and it's what you sit on top of with Sails. It's meant to be and provide this really robust, easy data access layer that is not very prescriptive about what data you're accessing. So very lightweight, basic methods: find one, find all, search, sort, pagination, that sort of thing. It's modeled after it's modeled after sort of a mix of Active Record from Ruby on Rails, Hibernate from Java, and Mongoose from Node. Again, they sort of threw all that into a pot, stirred it up, and out came Waterline. It's really easy to use. I found it to be very intuitive, and it supports a wide range of adapters, which is really kind of slick. And so all of your standard adapters are there: MySQL, Postgres, Redis, React, NoSQL, SQL Store, Mongo Couch, all that stuff. Twitter is supported. IRC is supported. Waterline is intended to, out of the box, not only work with data stores, SQL data stores, NoSQL data stores, but also web services. So if you're trying to access a remote API like Twitter, again, it's a really easy one, you can access that through Waterline. And it actually works pretty well. It's pretty slick. Again, it's kind of an example. But I mean, most apps these days use web services like this. Node is very good at web service input output like this stuff, so they wanted to make that available. Again, it's adapter agnostic, so you can plug into these things. I didn't put this in the slide, and we'll get to this, but each model in your app can support additional or separate adapters. So if half of your data lives in Mongo, the other half can live in Postgres. And Sails works the same way with each. Pretty cool. Next is a feature called policies. And policies follow a really, really simple structure. They're just Express middleware again. If you're familiar with Express middleware, policies are just an Express middleware callback with your response object, your request object, and a next function. This is where the convention comes in that policies in Sails are run before controllers. So based off of the route, and we'll see some examples on this, but these policies are run prior to when your request reaches a controller. And so you can do things like, if your user ID and just an integer comes in to via the request, or your session comes back from the client side, you in a policy can decorate that user ID and populate the entire user object. So once it gets to your controller, you don't have to go do that sort of upfront base legwork to make that happen. A lot of things that you can use policies for. Advanced permissions, decorating session data, all your authentication goes through policies. And the sky's the limit again, because it's not prescriptive about what you do within a policy. You just do your policy and then call the next function, and it moves on through the queue. The next big feature with Sails is socket I/O support. If you've ever been an app with Node and want to implement this real-time support, if you've ever used old technologies like Comet or more real-time support, building a chat application, that's the go-to request, or the go-to example with Node. You'll find that the standard approach is your socket requests don't follow the same structure as your HTTP requests back to the Node application. This results in spaghetti code right now, from what I've seen. There's a lot of different patterns to fix this problem, but Sails does a really cool trick in that the Sails framework actually takes and translates your socket requests back to your Express controllers, all on the same route. So we've got an example of this coming up, and we'll take a look at this. But so it unifies it all. Any request that comes in, socket or HTTP, it all comes to the same place, and you can bring your business logic together. Again, this is a real convention that there's some magic goes on behind the scenes to make this translation, but it's pretty cool in how it brings that together. Sails does a lot around this area of real-time support with sockets. There's a client-side library to support this in your apps. That's the one thing that it does provide. But that client-side library, again, is front-end agnostic. It can be used with Angular, Backbone, etc. And it extends socket I/O on the back end to add basic pub/sub methods or publish/subscribe methods. So you can broadcast events, you can join channels. It's rudimentary. It's not meant to be a comprehensive solution if you've used robust message passing in the back end. But if you're doing something basic and you're really just getting used to the idea of server-side pub/sub, it's awesome. Really, really cool stuff. So, and it's right out of the box and mixes with, again, the convention that Sails brings. Next is blueprints. And again, we'll have an example of these. But once you create your model with Sails, it provides automatically all of your CRUD blueprints, and it starts off with sort of an assumed NoSQL approach. So your model is blank, and it relies on you, the developer, to add structure and add validation to that. But I mean, it's really easy to get up and running, and we'll kind of see that here in a second. Your basic blueprints are search, sort, all the CRUD methods, basic pagination, so you can get up and running very, very quickly. And then it's slick because once you have your structure built out, you can one configuration option shut everything off in your app when you go to production. And you can even have it available in development and turned off in production. There's a lot of cool things you can do. It uses and has a built-in grunt-based asset pipeline. So if you've ever used a JavaScript build system like Grunt or Gulp.js, Sails brings some of this to you because Sails manages the concept of a development instance or a production instance. This is one of those things that is sort of a foundational need in most apps. If you're using something like CoffeeScript or Less or CSS preprocessors, combine and minify your JavaScript files. I mean, all of this is necessary these days and just good development practice. And Sails does a lot of this for you. It's pretty nice. Sails is easy to extend. I mean, this is really key for any JavaScript or Node application. The way that the application is structured, there's three main ways to extend it. And this is an advanced topic. I'm not going to go into this any more than this slide. But we've already briefly discussed adapters. So you can write project-specific adapters for your web service. Let's say you have a web service that you want to call with Waterline that you don't want to publish to NPM. You can write a specific adapter for that. You can write different database adapters. This is what I did and for my project, and was and able to share that with the community. There is a really robust generator system and underlying structure that is used, and Sails builds off of this, and we'll see the CLI interface for how Sails generates your application to do that scaffolding. So Sails brings basically the idea that you can write these generators, and then it publishes all of the core generators that it uses so they can be overridden in your package.json file and do anything you want. So you can have a real custom generator. If you're familiar with Yeoman, it's not based off Yeoman yet. This is a nice to have, a goal with Sails long term. But again, when they started, Yeoman wasn't that popular and changed a lot. So this is the goal is to again merge that in the future. And then the core is built off of hooks. Everything is a hook, and that hook can be extended or even fully replaced in your own custom configuration. So Sails, it brings some basic stuff to lift your app, but then all of that can be swapped out and changed on a per application basis. Or if you need something that's shared and more robust, you can put these and publish your own NPM modules that end up when you install your, let's say a custom configured version of Sails, they hook right in via generators or whatever. There's a bunch of ways to do it. So very easy, no special sauce. It's not declarative, so you don't have to go in and register a plugin or whatever. You can just extend it and off you go. Pretty powerful stuff. So a little bit about the current project. Current project is in just released v0.10 on last Friday, actually. So timing, I didn't coordinate that timing, but it works out really well. v0.10 has been, in release candidates for 6 months. What Node framework do you know that sits in release candidate for 6 months? My app I've upgraded to 0.10 about 4 months ago. It's working really well. A lot of people have gone through an upgrade process. So again, going back to that enterprise focus, stability, reliability, going through that 0.9 to 0.10 process has been really, it's been well tested. Early on it wasn't super smooth, but now it's a lot smoother. The big news, the big news is that Waterline, that ORM layer, added the concept of associations. So in 0.9, Waterline would not support and didn't have the ability to support relational data at an adapter level or at a model level. And we're going to take a quick look about how this works. But if you have, let's say, and this is our example later, but a message object, and you want to see what user populated that message object, you would have a user ID associated with the message object. You can now at the model layer tell Waterline that the user object relates to this user this way, or message object relates to the user this way, and then Sails will do the work to populate that for you as you ask for it. Couple of cool features, and this is why it took so long. It's supported cross-adapter. So if your Twitter message is on the Twitter adapter, your user is in MySQL, and then you have their history that's in Mongo, you can pull all that together. And Sails is really smart about if it's coming from the same connection, same adapter, it'll do that natively and do joins in SQL, for instance. If not, it'll do it in memory, but yet try to be really smart about it. So again, really nice feature. You got to be wise with it, but it's really, really elegant and saves time, which is again the goal. So that was just released in final release last Friday. So let's take a look. We're going to get our own application up and running, and I've included slides so you can look at these slides later and at least see some documentation, but we are going to go through this together in real time to take a look at it, what it takes to set up a project. So I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between my slides here and a terminal. Excuse me, let me increase the size of that. So I'm in a just basic Sails introductory folder. And I already have installed Sails. I wanted to make sure I could work offline if necessary. So I've finished this first step of npm install-g Sails. This installs Sails locally. You do need to have Node installed, and Node comes with the Node package manager available on the command line. But you can install Sails, and this will install Sails v 0.10, so you'll get the latest. I'm going to skip that just because for sake of time. So I do have the Sails application installed. Here's my usage, and this is the command line interface. And I'm going to generate a new app. And so we're going to take advantage of that generators feature to stand up a brand new app. Sails generate, and I'm going to generate into Sails Basic. Oh, we've got an error. Hooray for real live coding. So I'm going to make a new directory. Sails generate. Oh, Sails generate. Sorry. New. There we go. Okay, so we've got a new Sails Basic application. And here's what it did. We've taken the Sails generator, and this is again a package available on npm that can be overridden, and it has generated a basic Sails application. So we see a typical Node application structure, and going back to our slides here for a moment, I'm going to point out what's here right now, and I've ignored a couple things, but the things to know primarily are your app.js. That's your entry point. That's where Sails begins. I'm not going to go into that today. It just again includes Sails and calls it with some error checking. But that's all it does, and that sort of gets your app started. We will take a look at Sails lift, but app.js is if you node app.js, that it will run. Our Sails.rc is a file that you can commit to your project that holds your local configuration. And then our standard package.json file. And this is a Node package manager file. If you worked with Node at all, that's a standard package file. It's nothing special, but that includes your Sails application. And when you need to follow the normal procedures of, if you check out a Sails application, you drop in there and do npm install, and it'll pull it all together for you. Next is our basic directory structure for a Sails application. So 5 main folders, 2 big ones that you need to know about, and that is your API folder, and we'll be spending more time in that. But that's where all of your application code goes. Your models, your controllers, your policies. All your front-end code lives in assets, and assets is mounted to the front end in the assets folder. So you don't have to type assets.js, you just type JS. And that is where all your front end code can be served from. Your application config, so your config folder holds all of your application configuration, that blueprints flag, where your routes are, all that just lives in that folder. Again, I mentioned that Sails uses Grunt for task management, and that asset pipeline, if you've worked with Grunt at all, you either have a big Grunt file with all your tasks in it. Sails breaks that out a little bit, so if you need to override anything, you can do that on a per project basis. And then lastly is your server-side views, where your controllers are mapped and will serve your views from. And again, I got to hurry here a little bit, but we'll get through this. So next, we're going to use that generator structure to generate a user object. So I'm going to pop over here, and I'm going to say Sails generate API user right within my Sails folder. Hit enter, and Sails will generate a user model and a user controller. So I'm going to start the application at this point by typing Sails lift, and Sails lift starts Node.js underneath, and we'll start our application. And it starts it by default in development mode on port 1337 because it's pretty cool. It's very elite. So tells me where I lifted. I love this ASCII art. They've got a lot of cool ASCII art. So we now can go to our web browser and take a look at what we've started. Again, we've only run our generator commands. We've generated an application, and we've generated a user model and a user controller that both live within our application. So let's take a look at this. And here, hit enter, and here's our new Sails application. So right away, you're up and running with a really nice error page to generate. Again, this is what we've done already, and we'll take a look at that. Your basic application, you can kind of take a look at that. And we're going to be now jumping into the model and the controller that we've generated, and we'll be taking a look at those in a little bit more detail. We've already generated those, and we've lifted our app, and now let's take a look at what's available. So I'm going to be using a Chrome application called Postman to show you guys this API and what, again, after just these 2 commands is now available. So let's take a look. And the first thing we're going to do is just try to get what users are in the system and see how Sails responds. So I'm calling this URL, so the URL structure, calling our app localhost :1337, and then I'm calling that user controller, and we're going to take advantage of the blueprints feature here. So I've not set up any routes yet, but the blueprints say our routes for that user model are already available. And what I'm doing with the GET request is I'm trying to load all of our users. There's nothing in the system, obviously, because we don't have anything there yet. So I'm going to jump in and say, let's create a new user. So we have, this is that NoSQL approach, not created anything yet, but let's say our ID is 1, Our username is Mike Hostetler. Our Twitter handle is at Mike Hostetler. So I'm going to send this, pop it through, and lo and behold, we've created something. Again, just using our blueprint support. And now let's go back and take a look and see if we can't pull that back out of our data store. Sure enough, pulls back an array of all of the objects, and that array contains one object, one user object at the moment. Let's create another one, and Ralph Whitbeck, Red Wolves, ID of 2. We don't have any validation here, type checking yet, so we have to automatically increment our ID on our end. Create that. Got Ralph Whitbeck 2, and send, and there's our 2 user objects. So we've got some data started. I don't have any data store hooked up to this. By default, Sails comes with a Sails-disk adapter that just stores this stuff on the disk. So really easy to get something useful. What if I wanted to delete one of these things? So in deleting, I am going to call this ID, and I've now deleted. Again, first thing in our Sails object, it by default, Sails Blueprint went and looked up the user object with the ID of 1 and deleted it. So let's go take a look and see if it's really gone now. Sure enough, fell out. So that's the basic blueprint support. There's a lot of other things here that we could show you, but I'm not going to go into it. All of this is immediately available once you run that generator. The interesting thing is that our model, if we take a look at the code, there's nothing in there. We overlaid all of those attributes into our model just via sending those key value pairs via post. So there's no attributes to start with. User models do support attributes, and it's done via this. So your ID is an integer, your location is a string. Lots of functionality that can be applied here. You need to take a look at the documentation, but many different types are available. These are your data types in your data store in the backend, in your adapter-focused data store. You can add things like required. So obviously your ID should be required. You should auto-increment it when it's not provided. All of those flags are available, and it's really kind of nice because it's enforced at that API layer with proper HTTP status code. So you don't have to overlay and add a lot of error handling, that sort of thing. What's in our controller? This is that Express middleware, and by default, our user controller.js file is a collection of Express middleware based off of an action key. It's blank to start with, and we can generate, the controller generator has some options. You can generate some default actions. The first one, and we'll just take a look at this and how it works. Here's your Express middleware signature. So the rec and res parameters that are passed in, we call our user model, and we want to find that user model based off of the ID parameter. And then Waterline provides promises based off of the Q promise library, so you can then return your JSON of the model that was brought back. So it goes and finds this. If it fails, it sends a 404. So all we've done is we've taken a look at and re-implemented our blueprint-based controller based off of a new action. Here's our action right here, get 1. Express middleware, just organized. It's pretty cool. So how does that relate back to routes? So your default route, that first route that we saw when we lifted our app, is defined in config routes.js. That's your application configuration. There's only one route. and it points to a view, that homepage view, and that's again in those EJS templates. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of hurrying here, and we won't get to our final example, but I want to get through kind of this basic stuff. So if we were to take that controller we just defined, and we wanted to re-implement it, we would say off of a GET request, a call to user ID, and then this is that colon indication of the parameter ID, call the user controller with the action of get1. Now this is just a string, this is shorthand to refer to our controller that we defined previously. But again, Sails kind of takes care of that and ties it all together and just mix and matches things behind the scenes, supports all of your HTTP methods, and then you can build in your parameters. You can write in custom regular expressions. It's really, really powerful, and do callbacks and things even at your route level to filter what routes are triggered. This is where the sockets comes in. So I have a typo here. We change this really quickly. Should be user 1. So if we call, this is IO is an object in the front end provided by Sails and automatically included, and then it provides a socket.get method. And again, this looks like a jQuery.ajax or jQuery.get method. And when you call that route, again, sockets don't normally work this way, but when you call that route, it will actually trigger the same controller we just defined. No extra work. If you've ever implemented sockets and HTTP, you know how difficult this is. It's really, really slick. We'll jump in and take a look at a quick example of policies. Policies are express middleware that run prior to that controller action being called. So this slice of code is express middleware, same function signature, rec, res. Here's our next function that passes that callback. If we're authenticated, this just checks. It doesn't do the authentication, just checks if we're authenticated for keeping it succinct. Continue on, call that next function. Otherwise, call forbidden, which again would pop back a 403 forbidden, and you're not permitted to perform this action. So you can set that up so that policy runs prior to all your controller methods, or you can apply it on a per controller action basis. So there's a lot of flexibility to mix and match policies and how they kind of come together. I think I'm out of time, and I want to give people time for the break. There is a cool AngularJS demo. If you want to get further into Sails, I'll share these slides. And I do have a link to this demo. You just clone and do an npm install, bower install, Sails lift, and it's got some really cool real-time message passing, taking advantage of all the socket stuff, of really fleshed out example of how you can build in Angular. So thank you so much. I love Sails.js. I've fallen in love with it, and I hope you do too. Thank you for attending the talk today, and I'm
so
answer
Mike,
a couple questions. So
Mike, there was one question that came up a little earlier. I hope I get his name right. When Simo asked, "Where is your data? Is it hard coded? Is it coming from a DB?" And I think Francois answered the question that you said it by default it comes from a file. Can you confirm that?
yes, I can. So I just out of the box, it comes from an adapter called Sails-disk. Sails-disk is like a local SQLite database. I'll show you here. It's in a temp folder, and there's our local disk.db. There's all the data. So that we just created. There's our Ralph Whitbeck data. It's just a JSON file that's stored locally. So you can get up and running without having to spin up a database. And this is all easily overwritable. So
Remember to update your slide 24 to add the new keyword after the generate command before providing
thank
us
you.
the presentation. Francois said that. Oscar, we're going to collect slides and we'll create a page where you can get that. I'll email that out to you. But in the meantime, I'm sure Mike will tweet this out if he hasn't already.
Yep.
The link to the slides. So
Yeah, IRC is really very active. It's at pound Sails.js in on Freenode. Thank you, Francois. In a DB. Cool. Well, thank you so much. Please follow me on Twitter and tweet at me if you have any questions. And hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.